Hello, everyone. A little bit late. We are sorry for that. There's a meeting took longer than expected and longer than they actually rented the room. But now they are out, and I'm happy that you are all here. We start actually 20 minutes later, so I will make it not that long as a first introduction. I just wanted to say that I'm very happy that we can discuss the Global Gateway and the study, which will be presented by Farwa in a minute, that we can discuss everything. The study, which will give us an overview of the situation of the Global Gateway, is called The EU's Global Gateway, Smart New Strategy, or the Emperor's New Clothes. And I already looked on the cover of the study, and there was an emperor without clothes. So I assume that maybe you have a decision on an answer on the question if it's a smart new strategy or the emperor's new clothes. I'm very happy that we can present the study here, very happy that Eurodad and Counter Balance did that. And I'm also happy that we can discuss with panelists. Unfortunately, Miguel Oban Crespo, an MEP from the left group in the European Parliament, cannot be here today, but we will have other questions and answers, and also me. I'm Eriq Marquardt from the Green Group in the European Parliament. We have Nicolas Stötzel here, Deputy Head of Unit in DG INPA. We have Shireen Talat here, Co-Executive Director at Arab Watch Coalition, and Besta van Gaal from EU Observer. And I would say that I make not such a big introduction on the Global Gateway, because we now hear from Farwa about the study, which I hope all of you read, and if not, you have to listen to Farwa more closely. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Eriq. As organizers at Eurodad and Counter Balance, we welcome all of you. The participants today in the panel, thanks a lot for joining. To the online participants, thanks as well. So this is a very timely discussion, because you may have heard that the Global Gateway is being mentioned almost everywhere. You know, it's a lot of references in public speeches by the Commission, in social media. I don't know if you saw the extremely interesting metaverse video. So there's a digital platform. You know, it's been a year since the project was launched, so it's a very interesting moment to talk about it, because we expect more to happen on that front. So our report is titled, as Eriq already mentioned, The Emperor's New Clothes, What's New About the Global Gateway. And I'm going to start with a very brief introduction to what the Global Gateway is, followed by some concerns that we have raised in the report, and then 3 recommendations. So I'll try to keep it short. So just to begin with, I think everybody in the room knows what the Global Gateway is, but just a reminder, it's the EU's new flagship strategy, which is based on a series of infrastructures which are designed to enhance connectivity across the world. It covers almost every region, but actually we see a lot of emphasis on Africa. The Commission has presented it as the EU's response to the multiple crises which is happening in the Balkans, EU neighborhood, and developing countries. And the crisis, of course, we know is quite multifaceted. We're talking about a food shortage, we're talking about climate, and of course, we're talking about increasing debt and energy. So in a way, the Gateway is a very clear attempt for the EU to respond to the crisis, as well as play a greater role in international development. However, what we found in our report was 4 main concerns. So first of all, there is a lot of ambiguity around the purpose of the Gateway. Is it geopolitical interests, or is it international development? And I think we have to understand that this stems in from the issue of financing. So actually the 300 billion, which is mentioned over and over again in the Gateway communication, is not fresh money. It is existent money in which is being offered in other EU financial architecture and development funds. So in a way, there is the issue of redirection of development funds towards geopolitical objectives, And I guess the concern here is very obvious, which is publicly funded good for poverty alleviation across the world, and how it is being repackaged in a way. And an additional issue with that is the missing aspect of development additionality. So it's not clear how projects under the Gateway are going to deliver on that front. A related issue is of unreliable leveraging methodology. So the EU's Global Gateway is based on the assumption that it will mobilize leverage resources from private investors. However, this methodology has been extensively criticized, and it's not very clear. And it stems from the existing EU EFSD, which is the European Fund for Sustainable Development, which was launched in 2017. And the idea was that this fund would also leverage private investment. But this was actually also criticized by the European Court of Auditors. So in a way, there is an existing problematic assumptions on which the Gateway is now building. A third problem is that there is enhanced space for private sector, but it's missing the public purpose. So the Gateway is based on a problematic attempt at de-risking private investment. But given the current crisis, I think, and also over and over, CSOs and activists have shown that there are a lot of problems with de-risking. So using the Gateway as a platform which enhances de-risking is, to us, very problematic. Finally, there is the question of meaningful partnerships. One of the premise of the Gateway is that it's an offer, a positive offer to developing countries. However, this notion of partnerships is very problematic because at the moment, there is very little evidence to show that there is equality in the partnerships. So for example, we hear about the EU Advisory Business Group. There is a proposal for EU Export Credit Facility. However, we hear not very much about what developing countries are doing and what is their role in this partnership. So yeah, I have these 4 concerns, and of course they're very interrelated and they build on existing issues. And we thought a lot about it. We spoke to partners from developing countries. I'm glad Shireen is here and she can press on some issues, but we thought about what could be done to then move forward and make this Gateway actually a positive offer. And we have 3 main recommendations. First of all, for the Gateway to actually work in the public interest, it has to have a clear development rationale, which is a meaningful contribution towards poverty reduction and ongoing issues like climate change. To do this, the focus on de-risking has to be de-escalated. It cannot be the main purpose of the Gateway. And this also means that resources should not be diverted from development objectives. We think that the notion of connectivity has to be reformulated. So instead of connectivity being this abstract notion which cannot be defined, it has to be a people-centric development, that is infrastructure, not for the sake of an asset, but actually infrastructure for the sake of welfare and for human development. A second aspect we think needs attention is enhanced transparency. So even when we were working on the report, there was not actually much information available in the public domain. And I think this needs to change. We understand that it's an evolving initiative. However, it's been a year now, and I think it's time that there should be more transparency in the list of projects, the social environmental impact assessment, and the mandate of the new export credit facility. Finally, there is the issue of having enhanced democratic governance. The governance model of the Gateway at the moment needs to be reviewed for more democratic ownership. And that this means actually a broad range of stakeholders, including civil society. And we know that there are regulations already in place for neighborhood and development and international cooperation instruments, Global Europe. So we are seeking similar regulations for the Global Gateway. And finally, I think there has to be a demonstration of added value. And to this, I think the important point is that developing countries should have a greater say, and we should see evidence of it. So I'm going to conclude by just reminding ourselves that we are going through a multiple crisis, and for the EU to respond as a relevant development actor, it has to address all these issues and to focus on rehabilitation, to focus on long-term infrastructural transformational development. So we actually see development results in these countries 5 to 10 years, instead of something which is, really it seems catering to the private sector and focusing on very skewed business interests. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. And I hope that you can also respond to questions they arise. We will have a small round with the panelists on 2 questions and then open the floor also for the people who are here and the people who are here with us digitally. That's great. So my first question would be actually that, as Farwa said, it's a situation where the global gateway has been designed to, on the one hand, further the geopolitical and commercial interests of the European Union, and on the other hand, want to address the development needs of the recipient countries. But as we know from all the development discussions, that's not an easy task, and it's always not that easy to find the right balance, if there is a balance, and if there is a possibility to find the balance. So my question would be, how can the Global Gateway respond to both areas of interest which it wants to tackle, and what's actually the vision of the Global Gateway? And I would start with Nicolas Stötzl from DG INPA. Great for having you here, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to speak here today and to exchange with you. I mean, I fully agree. It's very timely, and I mean, I would also like to thank you for your report, for your study, which we have read very carefully. I'm not sure we agree with all statements therein, obviously, but it's very useful, and it's very important to have this kind of feedback, this kind of reflection, and also this kind of criticism, yeah? Because this helps us to improve and to understand also where we still have gaps, where we need to improve, where we especially need to explain, because I think, or that's also very clear to us, I mean, that there is still a lot of unclarity about Global Gateway, and this is definitely something that we need to improve. Our vision for Global Gateway, I mean, you gave a bit of the introduction and the background. And I mean, as you already said, I think the vision, or it's actually not so easy to summarize that in 1-2 sentences, but indeed it's about this linking development cooperation with the EU geopolitical interests, bringing those 2 together. And then indeed what is rather new with coming with a Global Gateway is the involvement of the increased importance of the involvement of the private sector. But I think what is very important, I mean, to really to avoid this misunderstanding, I mean, Global Gateway does not imply any shift of development funds to the private sector. I mean, and that's also, I mean, there's also not a focus on the commercial, or I mean, it's not. There's not a new purpose like to support the commercial interests of the private sector. I mean, the way we see it, it's more the other way around. I mean, really like to mobilize the private sector for our development objectives. I mean, that's the rationale behind to bring the private sector in, because I mean, it's, I think what we probably also can all agree. I mean, just with ODA, I mean, you mentioned the global challenges that we're facing. I mean, with ODA alone, we will not be able to tackle those. I mean, it will not work. So, I mean, we have to look for additional funds, and those additional funds, they would have to come for the private sector. And I mean, the Global Gateway, or the one important aspect of the Global Gateway is really trying to bring in the private sector, to mobilize the private sector for our purposes. When we say let's say in another vision, when we say the positive offer that is mentioned in the Global Gateway communication, I think like we'll talk about the details a bit later, but I mean, the idea is really that, I mean, development cooperation and EU interests, I mean, they don't have to exclude each other. I mean, the point is to bring the 2 together and to create win-win situations, I mean, that benefit the partner countries, but they are also in our interest. And for that, obviously, what is very important is to, and maybe also, the global gateway does not replace the existing structures and the existing framework for development cooperation. Our legal basis it's the NDICI Global Europe regulation, which remains fully in force. The global gateway has no impact on the NDICI. All the targets, the structures, all the safeguards that we have in NDICI, they remain fully valid. They are not put into question by the global gateway. I think that's important. But then again, okay, and then also, when it comes to country ownership, to the partnerships, the country ownership, when we, and then of course, Global Gateway, it's not just a Commission initiative, obviously. It's, and I would come to that. Global Gateway will be implemented by Team Europe. So it's, it's EU institutions, but it's also EU member states. It's a European, it's EIB, it's EBRD, it's the National Development Bank. So it's really like a big group of stakeholders and actors that contribute to the Global Gateway. They all have their own procedures, their own regulations. But at least when I speak now about how we make sure that the principles that apply in the Global Gateway, that those are respected, including country ownership, those processes we have in place, we do it as part of the program in particular, where countries are closely involved, where the priorities for the cooperation are agreed. And so the vision is, maybe to come back, not really good conclusion, but indeed, just to assure you, all principles that apply to development cooperation that exist, they remain fully valid. Global Gateway doesn't put that into question. It's more like to go the step further. To extend it, to bring in the private sector. The EFSD Plus, I think we will speak about it. That's a very important instrument. You mentioned the leverage. Can argue how reliable the concept is for the leverage, but still, those are instruments that come on top of what we already have. But it does not mean that we reduce other aspects of cooperation. Especially when it comes to, support of civil society. All that remains. When we speak about Global Gateway, it adds on to what we have. It doesn't reduce things that we already do. Thank you.
Just a very short follow-up question. So at the moment, we have kind of mobilized 18 billion euros, and up to 27, we want to mobilize up to 300 billion euros with the Global Gateway, with a strong focus on private funding, which should be more attractive. How much money would you bet that we are able to mobilize 300 billion up to 27? From your private money.
So if I had 18 billion euros, so the 18 billion euros, that's actually the contribution that comes from the NDICI envelopes. This is the money that we put in, and then additional funds then for the EFSD Plus. But then, the amount to be mobilized, that's indeed, my bet is, I think we will go above, yeah? Because when we made those calculations, and talking about the, I'm really not the expert for the EFSD Plus, but we speak to colleagues, and we have quite a range of experts who are assessing the feasibility and the reliability of those leverage ratios that are proposed. And the 300 billion are actually based on a rather conservative assessment. Yeah? So basically, also saying, when you look at the scope of Global Gateway, the way we see it, you have the 5 investment areas, but then you also have what we call the enabling environment, so complementary actions, complementary projects that all contribute to Global Gateway. If you include that also under the scope of Global Gateway, you will certainly go above the 300 billion by 2020.
When it comes to the Team Europe approach, what would you think, how much money will the member states additionally put into the system?
Our assessment, as you read, so we, according to this assessment that was done when the communication was published, we estimate that the EFSD Plus should mobilize 135, DFIs bringing in on their side 145, which is then, but that's the mobilization. So this is not what comes from the member states, but what the money that member states bring in. what we see, maybe what's interesting, I mean, if we look at the Team Europe initiatives, I mean, there the ratio is a bit that 1/3 comes from the EU budget and 2/3 comes from member state budget. So I suppose for Global Gateway in general, that would probably be somewhere around there. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. And now I wanted to ask the same question to Shireen Talat. She's online with us, and I think we can see and hear her. So what would you think, Shireen, how can the Global Gateway respond to both the geopolitical or commercial area, but also to the development needs? Does it work in the end? What do you think? And maybe you can also go a little bit more into detail on what you think, what are the challenges are. As we know, for example, when it comes to the EFSD Plus, it's not that easy to bring private funding or investment to areas where there is no friendly climate, so to say, for investments in general. So that leads to a situation where we see that it's easier to mobilize money to, let us say, some kind of more developed countries, but least developed countries are not able to get so much money when it comes to private investments, because there is just not the climate for investments in general, what makes it a little bit difficult also under the EFSD and the experiences there. And maybe you can also go a little bit more into detail on that, but you can also just reply to my question or reply to another question that you want to answer on. Yeah.
Hello. Well, thanks a lot for my colleagues and for our amazing facilitator here. Let's just sustain a status quo. The Global Gateway is not it's in its state now. It's not any kind of response of the multiple crises that we are living under. Specifically, if we're speaking nowadays about the Russian war, which the UN considered the disaster, the most disaster action that the human race are facing in the last generation, of course, plus the climate changes, etc. So, and putting in mind the role of the
Shireen, give me just 1 second, because I want to ask the others, because the sound is not that good. It's not easy to understand. I think for us in the room, it's a little bit easier to understand it if we use the headphones, and that makes it a little bit better. But if you can maybe, I don't know, come closer to the microphone or something like this, it would be maybe easier. I don't know. But we will be able to listen to you, hopefully.
Can you hear me better now? Is it better?
Yes, it's the best we can have at the moment. That's enough.
It's okay.
It's okay. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So, well, as I was saying that the gateway is not the response to the crisis that we were expecting. And specifically, I'm Egyptian, but I live in Morocco. Coming from the MENA region, the region is not only facing food crisis, but will be facing hunger crisis in the upcoming 2 years. So the problem is the gateway is not at all replying to the urgency to transition to sustainable economies and to address climate change and to provide basic needs. The problem is also that the development aspect of the gateway is not yet, because hopefully it's going to change in the future. It's not, I cannot say it is exists. The gateway lacks a clear development mandate, and how it was designed and the plan is surrounded by as my colleagues mentioned, lack of transparency, which raises a series of concerns, and putting in mind that the 3 billion euros are not fresh money, and plans, which is from our point of view as people from the development countries, from countries of partnership, as the gateway is proposing, that is a huge problem by itself, because it's rebranding development. When you're, for example, when you're asking DFIs to think about their development plans, to shift it to only investment plan, and this is what is clear at the gateway: investment, not for development, and even with the 18 billion that was accredited as fund, the concern that we are having here is building on different cases that can also be a burden to our countries. For example, the response of the COVID during the 2020 COVID microfinancial assistance MFA, with the IMF, was directed as a loan, as a debt. If you go back to the report published on Tunisian newspaper Mashkil, the case of Tunisia, the memorandum of understanding of the EU COVID assistance package with Tunisia will also specifically ask for a specific reform from the IMF. So conditionalities are there, and a huge question, which is now that moved it through the gateway. And again, if we are speaking about development, seeing how the gateway was structured doesn't give us any insightful vision about how that will apply, because even the engineering and the structure, as I said before, developing countries wasn't there because lack of transparency. We don't know if development countries were consulted. We don't know if developing countries also communities voices were there. So actually, it's a huge question how the gateway can address the crisis for the people federal, not for the sake of investments. Thank you. Only.
Yes, thank you very much. I understand most of what you said. Not everything, but I think I got the content, like 99.8%. Now we can come to the second round of questions. And as Shireen asked, so the question is, how can the gateway address the challenges also of the recipient countries? Actually, it has been presented as a great offer to partner countries, and maybe it is, maybe not. I will listen very carefully to the answers, and then I will judge on that. But no, my second question is actually, how is the partnership evident in the proposal of the gateway, and how will it support the long-term development goals of recipient countries? You already said that you want to go a little bit into detail on that. And maybe you can also add a little bit on how the partner countries see the proposals at the moment, and if you already have some ideas or if you already have some reactions from partner countries which you can present to us and give us a broader overview. So Nicolas Stötzel, it's yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Building a bit on what I said before, so the question, how will we support the long-term development goals of recipient countries? As I said, global gateway, when we implement under global gateway, it follows the rules for our general rules for development cooperation in DG Global Europe. So it's all based on programming, meaning, or almost all projects are based on programming, meaning this is based on the development goals of the recipient countries, on the development plans, on the priorities that were agreed with them. So, I mean, this is, I mean, when you say, I mean, it lacks development focus or a development mandate, I mean, for that to be honest, I disagree. Yeah? I mean, it's both. I mean, as we said, I mean, it's development cooperation and it's a geopolitical strategy, but it is also very importantly, it is a development policy. And I mean, also, I mean, in the Commission, I mean, I'm from DG INPA, and in the Commission, I mean, we are the lead service for the Global Gateway. I mean, and there's a reason for this. Yeah? I mean, of course, we work closely together with colleagues, in particular from the AS and other services. But I mean, there is a clear understanding that at least one focus of Global Gateway is development cooperation. And then, I mean, all the principles that apply to development cooperation, they are applicable in our Global Gateway. Effectiveness principle, I mean, country ownership, I mean, also transparency. I mean, transparency, I think I don't know if we have a problem with transparency. I think we still have a bit of an issue with communication. Yeah. And I mean, first of all, I'd like to make
I will write that down. That's a nice sentence. Yeah, I will also say that.
You can quote me. Yes. No, but I mean, there's still work to do. I mean, to ensure that people understand what Global Gateway is about. I mean, that's obvious. But when it comes to transparency, a lot of information is already out there. I mean, you don't find it necessarily under the label of Global Gateway, but a lot of key information. I mean, Global Gateway will be implemented by Team Europe, so mostly through Team Europe initiatives. And the Team Europe initiatives, I mean, there are several tools, and I don't know, I mean, it's the Joint Programming and Team Europe Initiative Tracker, which is available online, and there you find at least basic information on all TEIs. I think we're around 160 right now, per country, per area, and so on. So this is all there. So, I mean, it is fully transparent. Our colleagues are also setting up now like a more, I mean, there's some information on Global Gateway on the Commission website, but not a lot, I agree. But this is being set up. So a more comprehensive web presence with lots of information on Global Gateway, including initiatives. I mean, we also, I mean, to make people understand what we're also focusing a lot on identifying what we call flagships. So really like, I mean, those projects that really embody what Global Gateway is about, really to explain good example. And I mean, also to explain that, I mean, with the focus, I mean, it's not just about infrastructure. It's not just about connectivity. It goes beyond. And then we say, okay, now what do we have to offer? And I think that's really, it's comprehensive development packages that we can offer as Team Europe. So, I mean, we really have lots of resources and different organizations and funds that we can mobilize. And then we can really help countries by providing comprehensive packages that include, I mean, hard infrastructure. I mean, that's one focus of the Global Gateway, but then also what's like referred to as soft infrastructure, enabling environment. I mean, other reforms, policy reforms, environment. So I mean, and I think this is also what sets, for me, Global Gateway apart from other initiatives, such, for example, I mean, the Belt and Road Initiative. Thank you.
Maybe just a short follow-up question, because on the one hand, of course, transparency is also about communication, but it's also like structural issues sometimes. So what kind of role do you see, what kind of role the European Parliament can play in the Global Gateway initiative?
I mean, concretely speaking, I mean, in the Global Gateway governance, I mean, probably the key, I mean, Council will be closely involved for member states, obviously. But then there will be the so-called Global Gateway Board, which will be chaired by President von der Leyen, with member state ministers being present. And there the European Parliament will also be invited to follow the discussions. I mean, it will have an observer status, but European Parliament will be there. I mean, there are obviously other occasions for exchanges. But then, I mean, we are exchanging with many partners. I mean, of course, private sector, because there's one focus, but I mean, we are also talking to civil society. I mean, we had several exchanges, for example, with the Policy Forum for Development. I mean, to explain Global Gateway, but also get their feedback to see how we can get them involved. And all of this, again, then, I mean, you can't look at Global Gateway in isolation. You always have to look at it together with Team Europe, the Team Europe approach and Team Europe initiative, and then at the level of the individual initiatives. I mean, then also you have stakeholder consultations to ensure that there is an open process for the design for the design of the Team Europe initiative. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. And now Shireen again. I don't know if do we have a video? Maybe it's also easier without video to understand. We can check that if the sound is maybe a little bit easier to understand. So it's not about you at all. It's just technical issue. Yeah. So my question, as you also ended your statement almost with, is like, how can the Global Gateway contribute to the needs of the partner countries, but also how it should change, for example. So same question for you.
Can you hear me now better? Can anybody confirm?
Can you tell us about the weather in Morocco for a sentence?
Morocco is perfect. I know that maybe you are starting to freeze in Brussels, but we are in summer here. Can you hear me well now?
Actually, I think we can hear you well, almost. It's just not that loud. Like, say something again.
Now, 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it more clear now?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is actually part of the the challenges that we're living with in the region, as you can see. Even to have better communication like this is not. I cannot say it's a privilege that we have. So bear with me here, because at the end of the day, my region is supposed to be in partnership with the EU through the Global Gateway. But yet, and I will close my camera here to ensure that you're hearing me well. But yet, actually, what is really happening is we are falling in the equation between EU, US, and China. And this challenging and competition investment plans. But what I don't know, and it is really frustrating to face this again under this poly-crisis time, a disaster that we are living under, that we are all facing, and it will affect us all. And when we are speaking about partnership, again, it's not clear how we are partners in the Global Gateway, because again, it's not even in the structure. We are not there sitting in the. I mean, development countries, third world countries are not there sitting in the table to be understanding or to be understandable, or to understand the needs of this crisis. Again, also lack of development mandate is a huge concern, and also the rationale and the behind what is happening. You can see that, and I'm not against, but at least be fair about it. You can see in the Global Gateway that selling it, I mean, like disseminating it around the European states, that it's also going to create jobs for the European labor. And that jobs will be created in my own country, which is not. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but at the other hand, it seems like we are again going to what we have in history. Yani, it's during the colonial era, the European power set up a vast economic system to extract wealth, raw materials, and labor from the African continent. Although in the 20th centuries, brought independence to Africa colonized, but the system was never disseminated. It was only transformed often with the help of local post-colonial authoritarians, of course. And um, uh, if you are speaking, يعني if we just focusing on climate energy transition, you will find that the most of the investments, even from the DFIs, are considering for hydrogen as the way to save the planet from bad energy to renewable energy. But at the end of the day, our countries and the development world is the one who are paying resources from their water, from their sun, and actually paying the debt, implementing those kind of projects. If you see in Morocco, that solar plant, also supported by DII members, have raised questions about possible harm for local communities may suffer. The high cost of the project paid for the loans from international financial institutions has also raised concern about debt burden on a national budget. Those are all questions that needed to be answered. Which kind of partnership the Gateway is offering for us, while we are not there in the structure map. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Interesting. You raise also the very interesting question of which partnerships the Global Gateway will offer in the end. We will come back to that later, but first I want to give the floor to Wester van Gaal. He's a journalist from EU Observer, and I asked him if he needs a question to reply to that, but he said no.
Well, you can interrupt me if you want, if I veer off course. I am a journalist, so I'm not such an expert as the people I'm...
But yeah, it's also nice for me as a politician to ask questions to journalists, because usually it's the other way around, but okay, I like...
Right, okay, so you want to take revenge.
No, like, it's okay, it's okay. I will just give you the floor.
So just a little, I'm going to step back a little bit from the details. And the sense I have, and what I wonder sometimes is, if we Europeans actually, if we've grappled with the level of skepticism that exists among our partners, you know, about programs like Global Gateway in particular, but also in general, the way we do business. Like, I talk with a bunch of people who were the negotiators for the African Union in COP27 this year. No one talked about Global Gateway. No one talked about blended finance. They all talked about grants, direct money, public money, basically. And that's not what we're offering here. And the other part, I think, is there's obviously the criticism of extractivism. You know, our connectivity is aimed at resources and oil and gas and maybe some green energy in the future as well. But that's the Chinese focus as well. So that's not per se where we lose or anything. What I think is the problem fundamentally is that they don't know who they're dealing with, basically, right? There's like 50 private parties and like 27 countries and 3 institutions, and everybody thinks, okay, whatever, I don't know who's the boss here. It's quite clear who's the boss in China, right? So, and I think that's actually a really big handicap from the point of view of African or partners. So there's a lack of enthusiasm because of that. The other side is, I think there's a lack of ownership at our side. Like, we basically expect, like, I'm Dutch. The way we do business is, if there's not 50 private partners involved, we don't even like get out of bed, right? Like, we don't want to build a bridge. We don't have state capacity for that stuff. We do it together with private partners. And the way Global Gateway is set up is there has to be private partners because we only have this little amount of money. So where does the planning come from? Where do the projects come from? They come from the market. So we have to rely on the projects to be there, right? Like in the Netherlands, the interest rate was so low last year, 2 years ago, that the Minister of Finance, he basically borrowed 20 billion euros to do whatever. And then he didn't know what to do with it, right? So there's not enough projects, he said. So, and that's a problem because the ownership to get back, for example, if you want to start a project in, for example, North Mozambique, where we, like, you know, where the big gas find was in 2011, we relied on private partners to tell us what to do, what to de-risk, etc. So the Dutch government de-risked an LNG terminal for €1 billion. And there was actually, you know, an insurgency going on. So when we tried to do due diligence, we just sent some civil servants there with a helicopter. They didn't even get out of the helicopter. They just looked down and said, looks a little bit fishy. There's an insurgency going on. They told the government not to invest in it. The government did it anyway because they thought, you know, let's see. And I mean, if the government would have actually started this program to get back to the global gateway, you would not invest in something that's destabilizing locally, right? You would try to actually make it work. The amount of failure in the North Mozambique could only happen because there wasn't actually some clear responsibility there, politically speaking. So I think when I look at Global Gateway, I wish it would work. I wish in this current setup, I would believe it would work and that would only lead to like great solar panels in the Sahara or whatever. But what I fear is that we're waiting around for private companies to give us a choice to what to invest in and what to de-risk in. And then I wonder if we have the capacity to actually control if these projects are feasible, if this is actually what we want as a European, you know, a union or a partnership. Does it even fit in our plans? We're very dependent on the market in this way, in this setup. If we believe in the importance of private finance, right? So I'll finish there, but I think what I would want to point out is I spoke to the EIB vice president last week, and she told me private finance is the most important thing. And I asked her why, actually, you know, because what have we learned from the pandemic and from the energy crisis now is to deal with these, well, you know, uncertain times. You need a lot of public money, public responsibility to make it work. And I think Global Gateway is the same thing because we have to engage with the world, which is very uncertain. We try to be an alternative to the Chinese, you know, dictatorship or Washington, Wall Street thing. But what's actually like our capacity to do that? And who is actually responsible to make it work and to ensure that it's actually going to be what we want it to be? Yeah, so I'll stop there.
Yes, great. And now we can come to the questions and answers before Frank can give us some closing remarks, but we still have time. I don't know, I saw some questions also online. If somebody else want to raise a question, you can just write it in the chat. And maybe, I don't know how is it planned, but you can also just raise your hand online, I would say, and then we see if the technique works and you can raise your question online. But is there someone present who want to raise a question? Yes. Maybe you can tell your name first and maybe.
Yes, hi, I'm Andrieke Visser. I work for The Century. I have a question about the long-term sustainability of the project, also in terms of transparency and accountability measures, and maybe a question for Nicolas, if I may. I'm just wondering, how do we make sure, especially when we talk about public-private partnerships, that the money is actually going to be spent on the projects as intended? And especially in some African countries in fragile and conflict areas, we know that some of the money might be diverted by corrupt actors, unfortunately. The IMF this year in March launched a strategy because of that reason for fragile and conflict-affected states. And I'm just wondering if these considerations are also taken into account with the Global Gateway projects, because we want to make sure that actually the money is spent on the projects and that there's going to be long-term development and that not part of the money is going to maybe even finance instability or corrupt actors in the region. Thank you.
Nicholas, yes.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, maybe for that, my response. I mean, I can respond when to the part of Global Gateway that is supported or funded by the EU budget. When we do, because I mean, again, I mean that's our part. This is there we know the rules, we know how we do it. How member states, it may be slightly different. I mean, that's of course also an issue that at some point we need to address. I mean, like to see how to harmonize it better. I mean, and when it comes to, I mean, there should be like, I mean, there will be some kind of joint reporting on Global Gateway. I mean, there will be some kind of, I mean, discussions are ongoing. I mean, we are aware. I mean, it's being addressed. How exactly it will look like in the end, I don't know. I mean, our idea, let's say, is a bit like to build as much as possible on the work we have already started for the Team Europe initiatives. I mean, because there we have agreed ways of, let's say, monitoring and also for the financial tracking. And as most of Team Europe initiatives will contribute to Global Gateway, this will already be like a big chunk of the reporting also for the Global Gateway. I mean, how to ensure that funds are properly used. I mean, for that, there are several mechanisms in place. I mean, of course, I mean, there are monitoring missions, there are evaluations. I mean, there are audits. I mean, there you have, but that's, I mean, really like technical things. I mean, you have contractual safeguards in place for that purpose. I mean, and also, I mean, like, I mean, we as Commission, I mean, we don't implement it ourselves. I mean, so we entrust. I mean, we entrust DFIs, other implementing partners with that. I mean, all of them. I mean, by entrusting that, they become responsible. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's. I mean, EIB was mentioned. I mean, if we provide money to the EIB, I mean, they are responsible for the fact that this money will also be used for the purpose of the project. Yeah. So basically, they have to make sure that then when they forward those funds or when, like with a guarantee, I mean, if they invest somewhere, they have to put safeguards in place that make sure that those funds are not diverted. I mean, so there are things in place. I mean, you have Olaf on our side that may investigate. But let's say on the side when it comes to the EU budget, I mean, I mean, there are mechanisms in place, and I think they are rather robust, I would say. Yeah. But indeed, in the future, should be, as it's about Team Europe, we should also then see more closely with member states how this can be put into one. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Question answered?
Well, I think we can talk about this for days, no? But just one maybe recommendation, a problem often with the IEB and other IFIs. We see that the transparency measures that are in place don't extend to subcontractors and financial intermediaries. And that's where the most of the corruption or the mismanagement or the nepotism or the subpar quality of cement and products is actually happening. So if you could push for one thing, please ask them to include the entire supply chain of Global Gateway infrastructure and development projects on the ground. Thank you.
Yes. Nicholas, will you do that?
I will ask colleagues to do it. I will pass it on. I mean, that's for sure. It's. I mean, I negotiated quite a bit with DFIs in the past. It's not so easy always, but yeah. Okay, I'll pass the message for sure. Note.
Great. So we solved this problem. But yeah, I actually online I see a question by Luisa, which is I can also read it, but I also see that Lisa already said that. We will give the floor to Luisa von der Leyen from Caritas Europe.
Yes, hi, can you hear me okay? Yes, great. Thanks so much for this opportunity and for the exchange. My question is also about the private sector, because of course, I mean, I share the idea that we would like to be able to rely on them to push for inclusive and sustainable development, but I also think that we cannot just expect them to comply with environmental and human rights standards in a voluntary manner. And also there are a lot of complications when it comes to the different interests. It's not that simple. We know that when businesses have profit as their main objective, it's very hard to reconcile that with other objectives. And that's why we, for example, work a lot on social economy and of other different types of businesses. So I just wonder which space or attention is there in the global gateway to that? How is the selection of the types of private sector entities, and also the criteria that it's been used to select the participants of the business advisory group, I think it's called, or committee in the governance structure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was also a question to Nicolas. Yes, it was. Maybe you can gather some other questions for Nicolas. Oh, okay. I think you raised your hand before the others. Yes.
Yeah, it will be quick. So Karine Sauet from Act Alliance EU. My question is about the EFSD Plus, that will be the main tool for implementing the EC part of the Global Gateway. And I know that the windows were open during the summer and that you got a lot of, I think you got a lot of applications from DFIs mainly. And so my question is, what will be the main criteria for the selection of the projects? If apparently you have a choice, so you can apply your development lens as a DG INPA, and who will support you in this selection process? Who will be the experts? Or do you use external experts, or is it a purely internal process?
Yeah, I think one more question is good. Yeah, and you, and yeah.
Hi, thank you very much. I work for Barry Andrews MEP. From what I understand so far, there is no plan to include civil society in either the governance board or the advisory board for Global Gateway. The advisory board, as I understand, is going to be exclusively composed of private sector actors. Are there any plans to change that? And if you could as well give some clarification on what the observer status for the European Parliament involves, who will be represented, and to what degree can they actually provide input, or are they supposed to just listen? Thank you very much.
Okay, so we come to a kind of round of answers. I don't know, but like you can answer now. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, for the first one, I mean, when it comes to the private sector, I mean, there must have, I mean, the work is just starting. I mean, for the business advisory group, what is happening now? I mean, or let's, I mean, like the setup of the business advisory group. I mean, that was discussed also with the council. I mean, there were discussions in Coreper a few days ago where there was general, like a general agreement on how the global gateway governance should look like. The idea for the business advisory group is that, and then transparency, I think in that aspect, we can say we do comply for sure. I mean, there will be a call for application for the call, so transparent, like for, it will be like a high-level expert group, and then European companies or EU companies can apply so that their CEOs will be put on that, let's say, like roster of experts, which would then serve as a forum to exchange then in particular with the Commission. So that's the idea for the business advisory group. But there will also be exchanges at other level. I mean, there will be exchanges with business fora in partner countries, chambers of commerce, business networks. So all of this will take place to see how indeed we can bring together our policy objectives with the commercial interests of private. I mean, of course, I mean, we're not naive. I mean, the private sector will only invest if there is a commercial interest for them. I mean, if there's nothing for them, they will not do it. So, I mean, indeed, how to bring them on board for our plan, for our purpose. I mean, for sure, it's challenging. It's starting. I mean, I don't have the answers now. But I mean, as you said, I mean, I mean, we strongly believe that it's essential to bring them on board because, I mean, we mentioned the funding. I mean, funds for development cooperation, I mean, they are substantial, but they are limited. I mean, we cannot, I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, there will not be a substantial increase for that. So, I mean, if we want to, if we really want to make a difference, if we really want to tackle the current challenges, some of them were mentioned, I mean, then we need to bring in additional funding from other sources. Private sector, then EFSD Plus. The criteria for selection, I mean, actually, I was in a meeting this morning where it was mentioned, but I didn't pay enough attention, so I can fortunately not repeat all of it to you. I mean, of course, I mean, let's say, I mean, with the different investment windows, I mean, it's all, let's say, I mean, the areas where investments should take place, I mean, it's already framed with the different, and also, of course, like a number of policy criteria that will have to be complied with, development objectives, I mean, it will be also like also how that fits into the bigger Team Europe initiatives and global gateway flagships, like which is a bit like synonymous. I mean, that will play an important role. The selection process so far was done mostly internally on the side of the Commission. I understand that, I mean, and then there will be proposals will be submitted to the operational board of the EFSD Plus, and I mean, their member states are present. And that, I think, if I remember correctly, it will happen mid-December. Yeah. But indeed, I mean, there were numerous proposals. I think, I mean, I think 6 billion euros were initially planned to be made available or to be used for the guarantees. And I mean, it was oversubscribed by 3.6 times. I think we received 71 proposals from 22 organizations. So. And what I heard from colleagues, I mean, lots of good quality. So I mean, we are quite optimistic that we can really support some very good projects with the available funding. Global gateway governance for the board. I mean, let's say, I mean, like when it comes to, I mean, let's say, I mean, we are working a bit like the framework that we have. I mean, it's a bit set by the communication of last year, where indeed, let's say, I mean, it's like. I mean, indeed, like part of the governance, it's really like the Global Gateway Board that's mentioned there. It's a business advisory group, which is mentioned as part of the governance, which in my view is, I mean, to be honest, I don't think it's really part of the governance. I mean, it's also a forum to exchange. And I mean, so you could say, like, formally on paper, you could say, okay, private sector is in the governance, whereas others are not. For me, that's actually not correct. I mean, like, so we're talking to the private sector, but we also, as I mentioned, I mean, we're also discussing with with civil society organizations. I mean, that's, I mean, our approach is, again, to build on existing structures. So we're having those exchanges with a policy forum for development. I mean, we've also exchanged, I mean, more with a focus on Team Europe initiatives, as well, more also with the Concord networks. I mean, those exchanges are taking place, yeah? But there is no formal role in the governance. I mean, when it comes to the board, I mean, the board is, of course, free also to invite representatives from civil society, I mean, the board is free to choose who to invite. I mean, depending also a bit on the agenda to be discussed. But I mean, we expect, I mean, this is what we're doing now more at working level, but we expect exchanges on global also take place really at the political level. Yeah? So this will happen. I mean, on our side, the European Development Days, which take place each year, I mean, they are also very much focused on global gateway. And there, of course, we have lots of exchanges, including with civil society. What exactly does the observer status of the parliament on the board, what does imply? I don't know. I mean, we haven't gotten to those details yet, to be honest. Okay, thank you. I hope that more or less was.
Yeah, so we will send you the details on that and then it's fixed. Next question, or also a comment if you want.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much. My name is Maria José Romero from Eurodad. I would like to offer a couple of comments and some questions to the Commission and also to Eriq to hear your own reflections on this. It is very relevant to hear from you, the Commission, that the Global Gateway comes on top of Team Europe initiatives. And this is something that you have very present from the perspective that the Global Gateway sits in the INPA, right? This is a relevant thing. But at the same time, when you started your point on the vision of the Global Gateway, you also mentioned that the vision is to mix or to get geopolitical interests closer to development cooperation objectives, right? And here is where we have a bit of concerns on whether this can actually happen in practice, And here the question, right? What processes, systems, mechanism the Commission will put in place to make sure that this will happen in practice instead of having development cooperation gearing towards serving geopolitical interest, right? I think that this is quite a core thing in how we are reading the vision that you are presenting today, but that we are also hearing from the Commission elsewhere. So this is very relevant because you also mentioned, and we agree with that the resources from public funds are not enough, right? And we should work with private finance, but under what objectives or interest? Who will set the terms of that engagement with the private sector, with private finance? And here the point that Wester mentioned, right? When bringing the private sector in, right? How this is going to be happening in practice. So that's the question. And the second point that I want to make, and this also gets into Eriq's domain, the regulation of the NDC, right? You mentioned that this is going to be in place. And so if I understood correctly, you also mentioned that the Team Europe initiatives are going to be the projects, and there is going to be a tag, I imagine, a tag for global gateway type of projects, right? So Team Europe initiative projects, you get into global gateway type of projects under these. Okay, so how this mix or how this connects with the regulation on the NDICI? So how the connection will happen and where the role of the Parliament will come in upholding the regulation of the NDC, also to global gateway type of projects that are going to be geared towards geopolitical interest, right? If I understood the whole thing correctly, and to be honest, it's quite complex to see how you are going to get into this mix of things. Thank you very much for the discussion.
Yeah, like, it's not that easy. So I think in general, it's very clear that on the one hand, we have a lack of funding and we want to close this gap somehow. And the idea is basically, as Nicolas also said, that we want to close the gap with attracting more companies, which of course, as you said, have a commercial interest. And I have the feeling that in the end, it's always kind of a compromise between the development goals and commercial interest. In the end, there is no commercial interest in development goals in most of the cases. Maybe we can find some ideas where that is interesting, but of course, to keep the compromise as close as possible, the only way to multiply or to increase the private spending is to de-risk the investment somehow. And if there is not enough money in the end by the European member states, for example, that is not de-risking everything enough. And then we have in the end also the problem that if 27 member states have to invest billions of dollars, hopefully per year, they will not be very happy if they don't have a say on how it is done. And then there are big discussions. And then we have in the end also the problem that you said, it's like in China, it's very clear who's deciding. And in Europe, we do not even have a policy coherence, which when you look on the African continent, for example, like there are different European countries having different interests on different possibilities. So of course, that creates some like further discussions, which we can discuss for days now. I am at the moment, I think that, as I said, transparency is very well connected to also the scrutiny power of the parliament. And in NDICI, we have some scrutiny powers, but it's also new, and we have to see how it works, also together with the Commission, how to also focus a little bit more on the development goals and to not focus on the money we want to, like, like on the blending project and how we can just achieve the goal of 300 billions in the end, especially if we hear what we heard, like also from Shireen, if there is a feeling in partner countries that they are not partner countries but colonialized somehow, how should that contribute to our geopolitical interests? In the end, our geopolitical interest can maybe be that partner countries understand that they are partner countries as our partners, and we work together. And if they work together with the European Union, they are partners. If they work together with others, they are colonialized. But I don't think that this understanding is very, very present in all of the member states at the moment. And I think to bring together this Team Europe approach as a Team Europe approach which in the end also lead to a situation where our geopolitical interests are the interests of the partner countries. That's a long road to go, but there would also be my question as an additional question for Nicolas. Like, what do you think about the ownership question? How can we create ownership with the commercial interest of the private companies on the one hand, the geopolitical interest of the European Commission and 27 member states, and in the end mix this all together to a salad, which is just the interest of the partner country. So how, like, you as a cook, how would you do that?
Okay, and more questions I see there. We could speak about that a bit longer. I think as a cook, I mean, for me, let's say, I mean, when you say ownership, you're talking about partner country ownership, right? And I mean, for me, I mean, obviously, I mean, this has to be the starting point for all considerations, because I mean, whatever we do in and with partner countries to support them, it only works if we have their buy-in, if they share that interest, if they agree to what we intend to do. So I mean, this has to be the starting point, and I mean that's also then, again, coming back to that, the logic of the programming exercise, that there is an agreement with the partner countries on the priorities in which we work, and then once we have that identified, and then we can see, okay, what can we do? What can we do as Team Europe? And where are opportunities to also bring in the private sector? I mean, that's, I would say, like in very basic terms, a bit like the sequence. Maybe like to mix a bit the question. I mean, who sets the terms? I mean, what's very clear, and I mean that's in DICI, and that's also underlying principle. I mean, of Global Gateway, it's an underlying. I mean, the Team Europe approach, also European financial architecture for development. We haven't mentioned that one yet, but that's also relevant in the context. I mean, it has to be clear. I mean, it's policy first. Yeah, I mean that's the principle. So whenever private sector comes in, they have to contribute to our policy objectives, and they also have to comply with the principles that we put forward. I mean, for Global Gateway is a number. I mean, transparency is one. I mean, it's so this also has to be clear. I mean, will it work? Will it work in okay? I mean, to be seen. I mean, I don't know. I mean, let's see. I mean, I'm sure there will also be failures. I mean, it's. I mean, for that one, we're really just at the beginning. But I think we have to try. For that, it is important to be close interaction with the private sector. I mean, to have those discussions to see what can we as public. I mean, not just as donors, but let's say as public players. What can we do to make investments in partner countries more attractive for the private sector? I mean, you mentioned de-risking. I mean, that's of course one very important one. But let's say, I mean, it's also about, I mean, where we can complement. I mean, by improving the regulatory environment in partner countries. I mean, by improving the investment climate. And I mean, there are member states. I mean, implementing agencies, for example, come in with technical assistance. I mean, there's public sector expertise that can, and then again, and that comes then back again to, let's say, I mean, to the options and what we have to offer as Team Europe. I mean, where we really have a broad range of instruments of expertise that we can offer partner countries. I mean, how to align, how to bring together development cooperation and geopolitical interests. I mean, how to answer that in 1-2 sentences? I think that's very, very tricky. I mean, let's say, I mean, what is clear, whatever we finance, it has to fully comply with development cooperation objectives. I mean, for that we have the legal framework in place, and we're bound by that. And so, I mean, there is no risk that those funds will be used for other purposes. How this will then be used also, I mean, like geopolitical interests. I mean, also, I mean, development cooperation. I mean, that's our focus as INPA, but of course we also, I mean, we have to see. I mean, I mean, it was mentioned. I mean, one slogan that's often, I mean, strategic autonomy. Yeah? I mean, for example, I mean, energy. I mean, green hydrogen was mentioned, and I mean, of course, I mean, we as Europeans also have to. Well, of course, we have to look also at our own interests, but then we have to see how can those be best combined with the interests of partner countries. I mean, there are several big initiatives on the way on green hydrogen. One is in Chile, one is in Namibia, where private sector also plays an important role. But there again, it's key indeed. I mean, not just to kind of like to go there, extract what we can get, ship it to Europe, and send it out, but really, I mean, to make sure that we also build local capacities, that also, I mean, that the local industry benefits from it, and there is really an added value for the partner countries. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Before I give the floor for not his last word, but the last words for the debate to Frank, I wanted to give the floor to Shireen first to have some comments on the debate, and then to Farwa, and then yeah, we started 20 minutes later, and I think we will end 5 minutes later than 5. But another question. Also online, okay. So we will end 10 minutes later than expected. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, many thanks. My name is Michael. I work for Brot for the Welt, one of the bigger development aid INGOs. You talked about de-risking. I think it would be a huge factor if you would consider taking on the voices and concerns of the civil societies in these countries. We already see that there are problems in getting on board the voices of us, civil society in Europe. Please make an effort, because in those partner countries it's even more difficult than in Europe. So that would be a strong factor in de-risking the whole show. Another very practical thing, I'd be very happy if you could get a contact list. So we are all starting these discussions internally and with others, with networks and so on. It would be great if we can all get better connected. So if everybody agrees, if you can share the contact list, at least emails or so. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. We will check like if anybody is against sharing the emails. Nobody is against. Maybe someone online. We will see in the chat, but I think nobody's opposing that. It's also public information in most of it. Like that's okay. Thank you very much. And then we have a question online by Phoebe. Do we hear you? Hi.
I am Phoebe Sanchez. I work for the Africa-Europe Faith Justice Network. The Global Gateway Package first appears like a centaur. It's half human, it's half animal. And when you discussed it a while ago, it appears... Hello? Centaur, a centaur. It's like half human, half animal. And when you finish the discussion, it comes more animal than human. You're talking about public-private partnership. Without civil society, it becomes private-private partnership. And much more if you repeat that with partner organizations or nation states in the global south. And you refer to yourself as Team EU most of the time as like the harbinger of light, a harbinger of development. It seems like still we don't understand what is democratization. If you speak of development that does not respect democratization and does not have ownership from the public, it is still private partnership. So you don't have to invoke development. You just simply say it's a fiscal package for marketization of European interests. You speak of connectivity. What is that? Is that monopoly in telecommunications and transportation? You have to be unequivocal so people will not expect anything. You have to be straightforward. Is that simply a, a scramble over the market to compete with the Chinese and all others? Because the global South has been always in turmoil. And instead of helping us, you're actually pushing us to the ground. You speak of digitization. How far should digitization go? You should be unequivocal. That's just what you would like to present here. So when you speak of a market fiscal policy or a fiscal policy, which is basically marketization, then just be frank about it so people will not expect too much. Thank you.
And one other question. Thank you, Phoebe. Who wanted to raise a third question? Yeah, you.
A few words. I'm Fabio Amato from Advisor for the Left Group in the DEVI Committee. First of all, we would like to apologize for Miguel Orban's last-minute absence, but we would like to thank the Greens and Eriq for organizing this very interesting occasion of exchange of view on the global gateway. We share most of the concern raised by the study, and thanks to Eurodad and Counter Balance for the work they have done. I have a question for the Commission, because as you say, most of the finance that is there is leveraged. It's based on 1 to 10 ratio. And we see the experience that we had, apart from the EFSD, is the Juncker plan. The Juncker plan but the Juncker plan was not development. I mean, was investment for helping the private sector, in our economy. So, and the Commission claimed that was really successful, but then we saw the Court of Editors that about the report, I quote, that they mobilized 335 billions at the end. The Court of Editors said that they were overstated and that almost 1/3 of the Juncker Plan innovation loans went where they weren't needed and claims. So do we have the risk that also the global gateway could have be the same? I mean, because it's not clear what is the added value for the partner countries. I mean, of course, they can get investment. This is important, but I make an example. For example, it is about infrastructure. Namibia want to build high roads to trade with partner countries within Africa. That is one of the main problem that Africa has, is that there are very little intra-African trade. Well, it's more with the EU, the exchange that within the Africa. And they want to have public ownership of these highways. Can they apply for the global gateway? Or they can't because there is no private, subject to fund. And, this is just an example. Or can they apply for the loans, at least, saying that at the very end, or to ask for a common partnership, I mean, on the same ground, that it's 50 for a European side and 51 for the African side. I would like to make this example to better understand what could be the impact out of financing private interest and commercial interest and having green hydrogen from Africa to Europe.
Yeah, so Nicholas, you can reply to the question, and then we come to Shireen, and then to Farwa, and then to Frank, and then it's 10 minutes after 5.
Thanks a lot. Maybe I start with the end. How can they apply for, let's say, when we look at Global Gateway and Team Europe, I think what's important, I don't know if there's sometimes a misconception. Like all those projects that are being, or let's say most projects that are being developed, at least all those at national level, they come from the countries. Those are developed in the countries, on our side by the delegations, in close contact with member states and the partners. And basically, it's a bottom-up approach. Yeah? So it's basically, and through this we ensure that this is what we are planning, what we are supporting, that this also serves or correctly serves the local interests. I mean, that's important. I mean, when you speak, I mean, Juncker plan, the audit, I mean, that I don't know, to be honest. I'm also not an expert in the EFSD plus how to ensure that all the loans end up where they should be or that they, for the purpose. I mean, what I do know, I mean, none of the projects that are supported by the EFSD Plus are blank checks. I mean, all of them, I mean, you have a contractual framework in place. I mean, it's very clearly set out for what purposes, for what kind of investments the guarantee can be used. I mean, sometimes it's a bit broader, sometimes it's a bit more target, but there is a framework in place that should normally ensure that the support is used for what it's for the initial purpose and what we want to support. More concretely, I'm sorry, that's just, I mean, for EFSD Plus, for practical examples, I mean, maybe if we have another discussion like this, could be good also to invite somebody, then a colleague from the relevant directorate who can give you a much better answer than me. I mean, generally, I mean, the concerns of the study, I mean, for me, Global Gateway in general and how it should work, what is in for partner countries. Again, I mean, you laughed a bit earlier when I said it's a matter of communication, but for me, still, it's very much a matter of communication, of explaining what it is about. I mean, all those questions that you raised, I mean, they are also raised by partner, and I forgot actually because you had earlier asked, I mean, what's the reception on the side of partner countries? I mean, we do receive feedback. I mean, we not directly, but through our delegation. I mean, that there is still a lot of uncertainty, little understanding of what Global Gateway is about. So we definitely have to work on that. The feedback we got, for example, from the summit for EU summit earlier this year, where the Global Gateway Africa investment package was adopted. I mean, the feedback we got from colleagues was rather positive. I mean, I cannot judge, but let's say that's the feedback that we received, and that, let's say, I mean, the overall idea of Global Gateway was that received rather positively from partner countries. Well, I mean, that picture of Global Gateway as a center of, first I understood cyborg, which is also half human, half robot, or I don't know which one is better. But I mean, I still hope. I mean, when you say, I mean, with that in the end we may up with only private interests being served and not the public interest. Me personally, I'm convinced we will not end up there. I think we can make sure. I mean, because I mean, in the end, it's in our hand. I mean, we take the decisions on what we want to support and what we don't support, and so we can make sure that we only support what is in the public interest and not just. I mean, it will. I mean, if we support private sector, there will also be, but not just in the commercial interest, and that it is for the benefit of our partner countries and the local populations. And I mean, what we. Let's say, I mean, then I'm talking concretely. I mean, our unit, what we're doing. I mean, we're like the focal point for Team Europe initiatives. So, I mean, we provide lots of guidance to colleagues. I mean, we clearly advise, push colleagues to closely involve civil society when it comes to the design, to the implementation of Team Europe initiatives. I mean, if colleagues pick that up or not, I mean, that's not entirely under our control, but I mean, we are aware that civil society needs to be involved. So we encourage colleagues to do that at the local level. And as I said, I mean, we here in Brussels, at Brussels level, horizontal level, I mean, we also seek change with civil society on Team Europe and Global Gateway. Thank you.
Thank you. Shireen.
Thanks a lot. I just want to say one last word. The Global Gateway was presented to the world as the EU response toward the global crisis and the global recovery. But the strategy that the Gateway was based on was following the model of trickle-down economics that cannot guarantee prosperity in either EU or developing country, which put the EU credibility as a global development actor in risk. But there is actually a lot of ways to restructure this and to rework around this, because at the end of the day, we are all facing the crisis together. Clear development rationale behind the global gateway should be embedded, should be clear, to make a meaningful contribution towards poverty reduction and inequalities, climate change, etc. At the end of the day, this crisis is vicious, and it puts us all in the same between brackets, and it will not make any sense at the end of the day to light Europe on the count of Africa. At the end of the day, let's be fair. Let's have justice, economical justice, just and just development. Thank you.
Farwa.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Also, I wanted to say thanks to Phoebe and to Fabio for clarity of thought. I think it's really important at this time. I wanted to actually address something which is almost like a sacred cow and we just skirt around it, which is the issue of the financing gap and the role of private finance. So I think this linear narrative that there isn't enough funding, that there isn't enough finance is extremely problematic. If you go a little back in history, the Great Depression, or even you come a little bit further, look at the Marshall Plan, we do not see a very dominant role for private finance anywhere. So the private sector is a partner, it has a role to play, but actually we don't need to help private sector at this moment. If you see the profiteering around you, you see the food crisis, you see the energy prices, they're doing very well. So I think we need to move back from that and also think about alternative ways of financing. And very, very simple examples, if you think about COVID and the recovery, public banks in developing countries, in very small states, have done very well. So that's public financing as an alternative, which is extremely helpful. That's one aspect. And the second aspect is local development, what people can do for themselves, and what development partners can do for them, which is rehabilitation, which is support, which is development aid, and that too without conditionality. So we have to, like Phoebe was mentioning, Shireen was mentioning, we have to move away from this very old colonial mentality and a very strange idea of partnership. We can cancel developing countries' debt, and the EU can play a very significant role. In a way, we reset the entire global economy and we move away from the crisis that happened in 1980s. So this resetting can also be accompanied by IP waivers. You can give vaccines to people and you can save lives. So instead of this very single narrative of private finance as the answer, we need to think about very practical, very possible ways, and emphasize the fact that it's not about the financing gap, actually, it's about the gap of political will for countries right now. Thanks.
Yeah, especially in a situation where there are not only promises, but also responsibilities. And if you say as a international community and leaders that we will reach the SDGs by 2030, and then in the end say, but we don't want to pay for that, please can somebody else do that for us. That's also not the best way of doing politics in the end, but a complex discussion, interesting. And now we have the closing remarks by Frank, counterbalance, but I think we will have further discussions afterwards. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Well, a lot of discussion to wrap up to. Maybe I'm quite new, only since a few months here in this European area, so maybe I have not the most detailed expert knowledge. But on the other hand, maybe I have the advantage of that I can maybe look from a little bit more distance. And something that struck me what you say, and there were some people laughing about it, with the problem of communication. What's really interesting, actually, is that this is something that has been said since a very long time about European institutions. It was used for the first time when there were so many difficulties to have the new European Constitution through referenda in member states, that it was a problem of communication. And I think really that it's, if we so much later that you still think that it's a pure question of communication, it means that there's really a lack of will to look at how come people don't understand. That we are almost 20 years later, and how is this possible? And also, like here, we are trying to understand the situation. We are kind of like, as CSOs here, reading tea leaves of how these things really work. And I was thinking, like, since that private sector is a very important part of the solution, if you would give the same amount of communication to the private companies or investors you want in the program, I don't think it will work. So I think that some people receive good communication, or I hope at least for the way that you set it up. So there's really like communication. Yes, a good way of receiving good communication would be, as has been asked, not that you just ask like, okay, we also say to our colleagues or we say to each other that we have some dialogue with CSOs from Europe, but even more important in the other countries, but that they have a formal role. And I think it's very important for a very specific reason. And that is, it's being said every time and again and again and again since I don't know how much time, but we are in this multiple crisis, food crisis, energy crisis, climate crisis. It doesn't end and it becomes bigger. But I listened here. I've been to a few other places where there were discussions about the global gateway, and almost every person from the institution starts by saying we are in this different of crisis and we need this response. But, and this goes back, like you also said it a little bit, we have this strategy, but basically we use the same mechanisms, we have the same regulation for NDICI, et cetera, and we build on this. But how, with the same kind of policies, we are going to fix the problems that were created with these kind of policies? So what I really see is like, on the one hand, there's a kind of a cognitive dissonance, where on the one hand, there's a lot of acknowledgement that we are in deep crisis, but on the other hand, we don't really take it as seriously to really open up the way in which we work. And I think there's a lot of things to be done, and one of the main reasons why we wanted to have this debate here today is because we think there will be a very big role, not only for us as civil society, but also for the parliament to have a role in this, to have a discussion, have a critical discussion, take limited powers, but use all the powers that you have to have an open and transparent, etc., debate as possible on this issue. But it's clear, like, how can we solve these crises if we don't change the way that we are working? That really, I don't understand. You could be right or not right about that. To a certain extent, there can be here and there a positive impact, but it's for sure. Like, how can, in many of these countries, if they cannot make public infrastructure, if they cannot set up, become autonomous, etc., as well, if we don't really help them with this, and there are many questions, but there are many remaining questions, but it also means it is not at all clear how the global gateway is going to deliver on this. How are we going to be reliable partners for them in the future? I think there's a level that is not only about development. I think that you raised this issue a little bit, that I think that is of increasing importance, that this fact that this geopolitical level comes in is also because in some way there is more geopolitical conflict, and as Europe we are a bit in decline on the international scene. And maybe it's also time that if we want to have good partnerships in the future, if we want to have to be connected, that we really need to have something to offer. And now it's not clear that there is a good positive offer on the table. It's just not so clear yet. For the rest, I think that it's interesting discussion. I want to thank all the speakers who came and all the rest who attended. We will continue to follow up together with Eurodad on this issue for sure in the next year. I want to thank you all for your presence.
Yeah, I also just wanted to say thank you to everyone, especially also Nicolas for also accepting the criticism which was here. Next time you can bring a friend or colleague from the European Commission with you, and then it's maybe easier. No, I hope you also enjoyed the debate, and I think it's also important to discuss the issues and challenges ahead. I think it was very clear that, and it is very clear that Global Gateway is not only a way forward, but also a challenge at the moment. And I think, and I'm sure that on the way until 27, there will be many possibilities also to contribute from the, and I hope many possibilities to contribute from the civil society, but not only from the civil society, but also from the parliament. And I also hope that the structure in the commission allows that if, as you said, failures happen, we can also maybe redirect some of the ideas which are on the table at the moment to have a success together. And if it's called Global Gateway or has another name, I don't know, but success would be good in the end. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending, especially the people online, but also the people who are present here, of course. And yeah, I think there's some coffee. I hope you online have also some coffee somewhere, but we have coffee here. And wish you a nice evening and hope to have a follow-up debate on that soon. Thanks.